Yeah, done. Okay, we can start now. Hello, everyone who joined us on Facebook. I see that some people are coming already. Yeah, Jeremy, hello one more time. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. I will introduce you first. It's a big pleasure for me to having you with us. Jeremy Myerson is the director of Helen Hamlyn Center, right? The professor of the Helen Hamlyn Center and Royal College of Art. I've been lucky to have been your student very much. Also you're running the WORKTECH Academy at the moment. Yeah, Jeremy is a huge. I don't know. I don't know anyone else who knows so many about the human-centered design, people-centered design, about the research and design together, and it's so inspiring. So I'm really glad that you could come and share a little bit of your knowledge with us. And we can start, I think, with an interview. And first of all, I would like to ask you, what's the meaning of the people-centered design? What is this? Why designers should be interested in these kind of things?
Yes, well, very great to see you, and greetings to everybody from London. A very rainy, cold London this morning. So yes, Katrina explained that I am wearing two hats today. One as the Helen Hamlyn Chair of Design at the Royal College of Art, and the other as Director of WORKTECH Academy, which is a global knowledge network looking at the future of work and workplace. The reason why people-centered design is so important is that when we design offices, public spaces, learning environments, any type of space, the most important thing is really human behavior. And what designers are trying to do is really encourage certain behaviors and discourage others, or support people in their well-being or their productivity or their learning. And historically, I think the people aspect has been missing from a lot of design and architecture. So that's why people-centered design is so important. It's actually putting the person at the center of the process, their motivations, their behavior, their preferences, and bringing people into the design process.
I'm just turning off the my sound sometimes because I have two cats and they're getting mad sometimes. Yeah, I totally agree. And you know what I faced, and it's my big sorrow when I came came to Moscow after the study and became an architect, actually, that it's exactly the truth what you're saying, and it's still the truth that sometimes design is really missing the people needs. And could you please explain us how this process of the research and design works together, which stages it should include when we focus on the people first?
So a people-centered design approach has some very specific characteristics. I mean, designers have always looked at people and they've captured requirements. Usually they capture that requirement in a brief directly from the client. So say you're designing an office floor, you tend to get the managers telling you what spaces they want, but rarely do you talk to the actual workers on the office floor to see what they would like and what would work for them. And so this is going beyond the traditional client brief, but having some kind of engagement with the people who will actually use that environment. And not just simply studying them from a neutral scientific perspective as though they're lab rats, but actually engaging with them on an empathic basis, much more engaged in terms of their lived experience. So it's not just about designing for people. It's almost designing with people. And if you take that a stage further, you can then have co-design processes and involve people in the creative decisions around their own environment.
And when we involve people, which tools can we use? What kind of methodology it could be? Like, what should we actually do when we starting the process? And in which stages of the process we should exactly start to involve the respondents?
So at the Royal College of Art, we call it an inclusive design process. And the word inclusive is really important because you're including people in the way that the new environment is designed, but you're also including people in a solution which they feel they have some agency over, that they recognize their own experience in that solution. So in terms of tools, there are a great many, and people are inventing new ones all the time. But it's really important as a designer to observe, to spend a lot of time wrestling with the problem in design rather than jumping to the solution. So observe, go to the spaces at different times, talk to people, look at how the space is being used, and you'll get insights and ideas far beyond the traditional client brief. Do some interviews. You might put a provocation into a space that will encourage some responses. So for example, I've seen designers put an ideas tree into a space and ask people to write little notes and attach it to the branches of the tree about how they feel about that particular space and what they would like to see. It's all ways of using creative ideas to engage with people and get their feedback. And then you get a much richer brief. You can combine that with the traditional client brief, which talks about net usable space and head count. And you put together a composite picture of what the managers would like the space to do, what the staff would like it to be, and you begin to work out a much more holistic approach to how you might design the space.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm facing the situation where I'm trying to explain the value of this research process. And very often people are saying that, okay, we can do this, but it's costs a lot of money and it costs time. And in the end, we will have almost the same what we have in the brief at the moment. And it's my personal probably pain, but maybe someone will share this, how to deal with it, because I see when you interact with people and you can give much more value, but on the paper, when you're actually creating the brief, it might be similar to what people had like a normal brief.
Yeah, well, there are two big barriers to inclusive design or people-centered design approach, and it's time and it's money. And my own experience shows that it needn't take up extra time. You can do a lot of exercises very, very quickly in understanding people and human behavior and putting the user at the center, and it needn't cost more money. And if you look at the software industry, they say in software that the further up the process you go, the later in the chain you go fixing things, it costs more and more money. And surely it's better to really front load the innovation process so that you spend a lot of effort and time at the discovery phase and the definition phase of a project brief, so that you know that you're solving the right problems with the right tools and the right solutions. And then you come into a development phase, rather than what the traditional design model is that you rush through the discovery and definition because designers are really keen to design and do a completed scheme. And then you run into problems later in the process, and you start having to go back and revisit assumptions you've made earlier on because you've not interrogated them sufficiently. So I think my argument, and this is our process, is for a much more rigorous approach at the research phase of any design scheme. Define your problem, discover what other people have done in other industries or in other spaces, think laterally around the subject, spend a lot of time on the discovery and definition of a project. And that will then give you an evidence base that's very much based on people's experience, that when you actually come to design and come up with your solutions, you're not acting on half-truths or assumptions or hunches, you're acting on real, robust evidence. So I think that is the core of the methodology. And it's also a way of saying to people, this is going to save you time and it's going to save you money later in the process if you front load the way that you approach a design project. I've lost you.
Yeah, sorry. It's because I'm turning off sometimes the microphone. Yeah, I'm totally agree with this. And you know what I figured out in my personal experience, each time when you're doing this research process and when you're really interested in people, you get very, very happy clients in the end. Yeah. And they're always coming back to you. They're giving your best recommendations that could be. And the people for whom you are designing, they are really much more productive and happier in these places. And it's such a great result. Really, I'm very, very happy each time with this. But still, even having this experience, sometimes we're facing the situations when architects' vision of the space and where the people needs are not in the same, like I forgot this word in English, but they're different. And when they're different. And when architects are starting to understand what the people actually mean, they're saying, okay, come on, it's not so beautiful or something, it's not so artistic. How to deal with this way of thinking, like I would say.
So another of the barriers to kind of people-centered design is that some architects and designers feel a loss of creative autonomy. And they feel that their creativity is compromised. And at the Royal College of Art, we take the creativity of the artist and the designer very seriously. And we're not suggesting through this process that the designer abdicates all responsibility for design decisions, and they simply act as a scribe or a translator of what people are telling them. Often in the process, you'll get very contradictory messages. You'll get some people telling you some things, other people telling you other things. You know, some of the evidence that you gather is contradictory. You know, it pulls you in several different directions, and this is when your skill as a designer comes in. Ultimately, you know, I believe that to design is to decide, and it's ultimately the responsibility of the designer to make the decisions about the plan, the form, the materials, how the space is going to be configured and designed, and so on. So you're not abdicating responsibility. You're really designing from a bigger base of evidence and research, and you're pulling people into the process and recognizing that your design scheme is going to be based on how people feel about space, not just what they do. And I think that's an incredibly important distinction. It's a very big part of workplace design in particular now, is that we're more focused for the first time in the 100-year history of the office on how people feel about work is as important as what people do at work. We used to design purely for process, as though people were cogs in a machine. We worked out what their functional needs were and what they needed to do in a working day and what tools and settings they would need. Now we're interested in the experience of work, how people feel about it. So we're introducing things like well-being, and we're recognizing that people don't just have functional needs, they have psychological needs. And that's the big new frontier of workplace design.
Yeah, and if we are saying about, I think, creative work or works that require some kind of innovation thinking, it's first of all the psychological well-being of the people, because
Yeah.
they can't be creative if they feel psychologically depressed or stressed out.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so great. And Jeremy, could you please share maybe some of the projects or examples how the people-centered design helped to create great design projects actually, or maybe some research
Yeah,
I
I mean, we've done a lot of research in this area. I mean, there's been a shift in workplace design away from kind of physical comfort, if you like, or ergonomic or functional comfort, towards psychological comfort. And it was the French-Canadian environmental psychologist, Jacqueline Weischer. She defined more than a decade ago 3 levels of comfort in the workplace. And it's a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. On the bottom level, you've got physical comfort, whether the building is too hot or too cold, or whether whether it's unsafe or safe. And health and safety rules cover that pretty well. And for a generation now, most office buildings are perfectly safe and work functionally. Then there's the next level, which is functional comfort. Can we have seats which don't give us backache? Can we have sunlight not producing glare on computer screens? Can we shield buildings? Can we get the air quality right, and so on and so forth? And we've got very, very good at that. The ergonomic side of the office has improved over the years. The big new frontier is psychological comfort, and we've looked at that a lot. And especially in large open plan offices, we've done a lot of work around how do you give people psychological comfort when they've been working in very, very big, noisy environments where they're being distracted all the time. And we looked at the world of theatre design, and we looked at how theatre sets get flown in, if you like. They're up on strings in the ceiling, and then they come down and create a psychological effect. And we developed, working with some manufacturers, we developed a range of sort of enclosures made out of textiles that come down from what's known as the flies, coming down and forming in a large open plan space an enclosure so that people could have a private meeting, and then when they don't need it, goes back up into the skies again. So
Yeah.
we've been doing quite experimental work. And that type of work doesn't come from a conventional client brief. It comes from talking to people and studying people who say, I would just love to have something that I just went into for 20 minutes to have a private conversation with somebody, and then it would go away again, and it's turning that into a real design proposal.
Yeah, and could you please, I also, while you were responding to this, I was thinking about teams who are doing this. What kind of people are working in this kind of teams? Because I think it's very diverse. It's a high diversity in these teams needed, and also what kind of skills or maybe some personal characteristics that people need to have to work in this creative way.
So in the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design at the Royal College of Art, we've got quite a mix of people. We have people like social anthropologists. We have people with an engineering background. We've got people who have been through a conventional art and design training. And we are great believers in professional design skill and expertise. But what we try and do, we have a training program. I think when you were in London, you met some of our research associates.
Yeah, sure.
We train professional designers in the basics of social science inquiry. So we as you did on the course that you took, we train people in basic ethnographic research, so they can go into a workplace or a learning environment or a school or wherever, and they'll study the interactions between people and spaces and things, and learn and learn from their encounter, and learn to identify and recognize patterns and glean insights and so on and so forth. So we have largely a design trained group of researchers, and there's been a big trend around the world. You know, the trend of design thinking is to get non-designers to learn some design skills. At the Royal College of Art, we've taken the opposite idea. We've taken trained designers, but taught them some social science skills. So it's a kind of different dynamic. But these are not difficult techniques, and really anybody can pick up on them and use them. And of course, when offices were really paper processing factories, and it really was work which repeated, and the office came out of the factory and there was a repetitive element of it. It was administrative work. Then you could apply all kinds of standard design templates and approaches. But now what we have is we're in the world of knowledge work, and knowledge work is very, very different. No 2 days repeat. People aren't working by rote. They're not doing standard things. They're using their initiative, their prior learning, they're using their imagination. And a lot of what goes on in the workplace is going on inside people's heads. So we need a much more sophisticated approach to the psychology of work. And that's why a people-centered design approach, in my view, is a lot more powerful.
Yeah, like thank you. It's so inspiring, really, because yeah, it's still. We had a talk with Elvira Munoz a few weeks ago, and she told us exactly about that. The whole strategic approach to design, it's the way people think, not exactly the tools they have, but also the way how they think, and how they have this open-minded way of thinking. I think also it's exactly what you're saying also. And could you please, coming back to the current situation, could you please maybe share your vision of how the current crisis of COVID will affect the way we work and the workplaces itself?
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic, because many of the trends in workplace design have now got to be reversed. And the post-COVID landscape for work is going to look quite different, I think. So the first thing is that the world has now gone into a giant involuntary experiment in remote working. Everyone working from home, and companies which were very resistant to more flexible working and more home working, and people being outside the supervision of managers in an office building. They've suddenly, without any warning, without any preparation, they've had to adapt to this new environment. Of course, some companies have been developing home working and flexible working for 2 decades. Others have resisted it and have been dragged into the 21st century screaming. So that's very interesting, which companies are going to survive and which companies are going to thrive in this environment. And I think it's probably to do with the amount of preparation you've had and how much you've been willing to engage with this culture before the crisis. I think the other thing is that the way we use office buildings in the future is going to change, certainly in the short and medium term. I cannot see people rushing back into the office, even though they're frustrated at being at home. I cannot see people in the current crisis and worries about social distancing and hygiene and hand washing going into high density open plan spaces where you're sharing keyboards, you're sharing desks, you're sharing chairs, you're sharing computer mice. Are you going to do that? I don't think people are. People are going to be very wary of queuing up in crowded staff restaurants at lunchtime and having socialized eating. There's going to be a much bigger focus on hygiene, on your own personal space. And a lot of commentators are already predicting that having got rid of cellular offices and people having their own space, that some type of cellular enclosure will come back in. I mean, I've seen in some cities around the world, large organizations renting private apartments for their senior executives to work safely, 2 or 3 people in an apartment. Yeah. So the idea of the city center office, probably a tower, packed with people, high density, the high rental costs offset by the high numbers of people you can accommodate, that model will be broken. So people are going to have to think new ways. I mean, there's already been some interesting concepts come out. Cushman and Wakefield in Europe have introduced this thing called the 6-foot office, where there's a 6-foot
6-foot office?
Yes, well, it's open plan space, but there's a 6-foot cordon sanitaire around each worker. How's that going to work economically? I just don't think it will become viable for companies to operate in that way. I think what they're going to do is use their office property, these assets. They're going to allow workers in at different times. So, maybe workers with the surname from A to M will work Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning, and N to Z will work Thursday, Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, and Friday. They'll in the way that certain cities don't allow cars with certain registration plates, certain number plates into the city. In order to reduce car use in the city, they'll reduce office worker use in office buildings. I think some of these things will come in. I think there will be more home working. People will work more flexibly. People have been learning very fast how to use Zoom and Slack and Microsoft Teams and so on. And so these digital tools are really going to be used until there's a vaccine, until everybody feels very, very safe. I think this will continue. But even so, I think that there's been a psychological reset in the minds of a lot of people. They think, well, why did I commute into Moscow for hours and hours and hours, every day when I'm much more productive at home? Or I could just go to a neighborhood office and speak to the team, over digital tools. So I think when a system is so badly bent out of joint, when it slips back, it's never going to slip back. It was never going to reform in exactly the same position it was before. So I think we're going to have a new normal in which there will be more remote working, more flexibility, and less high densification of office assets.
And if we will say about the close future of the work, so we can say that it's like 2 stages. First, it's till we don't have the vaccine and till we don't feel totally safe. And here we will exactly focus on health and safety and social distance in our workplaces.
Yeah.
And probably the second one, it's the one which will include more of remote work, and what will probably implement something like activity-based working, or even I've heard from one of our previous interviews, like mobility-based working.
Yeah.
based on the mobility types of people.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, I think the good news for office workers, the good news for the office design industry is that offices aren't going to disappear. That everyone's always predicting their demise, but they're not going to disappear. But they are going to become accelerated spaces for innovation, interaction, training, mentoring. The idea of carting lots of people into the central,
Touching people, actually.
well,
Because,
you
yeah,
know, the idea of pushing people into an office just to sit at a desk and answer emails when you could do that somewhere else. So we're going to see less traditional offices, you know, lots of people at desks in big open plan space. Offices are going to be designed more creatively in the future to collaborate, to become collaboration spaces for shorter periods. So people in a working day may do a couple of hours at home, you know, with a laptop or mobile,
yeah.
a smartphone. And then they'll come in for a meeting, and they'll come to the office building and have some lunch and do a collaborative exercise, and then maybe end their working day somewhere else. It's going to become more fluid. And it's going to be based around the tasks and the needs rather than presenteeism. You have to be here at 9 o'clock. You have to sit at that desk till 5 o'clock. That really is an industrial 20th century model. And I think what the pandemic is doing is really accelerating some trends which were already there, but it's forcing companies to rethink, well, why do we need office space? And what are we going to do with our office space? They certainly need physical places of work as the anchors of the organization, but these places will be used in a new way.
And actually, I think it's a great time in history. For example, for Russia, we've been about 10 or 15 years away from where Europe and States in terms of the workplace design actually are. And now we have a great chance finally to get to the same step in the way how people work and think and collaborate.
Yeah.
And also it's a great news for companies also, because they finally can rent less space.
Oh, yes. So I don't know how the co-working movement is in Moscow. There are some co-working spaces in Moscow now.
Yeah, there are some co-working spaces. We even have, we work at the moment about 2 or 3 locations in Moscow and maybe one in St. Petersburg. I don't remember actually. But yeah, we have some, but not so many as in London, for example. But it's really very, for the last year or two, it's very demanding area, because lots of company, when they're renting the places in the business centers, they're always asking, do they have a co-working? And if so, it's a great plus for the location. So
yeah. So you know, there's 2 schools of thought about co-working spaces. Will they die or will they grow? I think they will grow, because yes, they will lose some business from freelancers who can't afford the monthly subscription and probably have to go and work from home. But on the other hand, more corporate organizations are going to take space in co-working and say, well, we don't need all these big office buildings. We can give memberships to some of our workers to work in a co-working space. They work a bit from home and they'll come into our office building for these mentoring and collaboration activities.
guys on Facebook are saying that it's more than 100 co-working spaces in Moscow at the moment.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I think that will grow probably. What's also very interesting, I don't know what the lockdown is in Moscow, but in London, you know, the pollution has gone right down.
Yeah.
Our air quality is better. Our skies are bluer. We don't have planes flying over the city every 2 minutes. You know, I mean, the economic inactivity is a massive, massive problem, and you know, is very, very worrying. But for the environment and the natural habitat, you know, suddenly the world has just stopped for a few minutes, and allowed nature to recover. But it has an effect on people, because bad air quality kills lots and lots of people in London every year. And our air quality has definitely improved. And will people want to jump back onto the same frenetic speed of life, the hamster wheel of economic activity? Will people find alternative ways and maybe work a little less or a little less fiercely? So there's all these questions, which are kind of philosophical questions, if you like, but it has a direct impact on designers and the design process, because, you know, designers hold up a mirror to what changes in society in the way that they make their decisions. So I think it's a really, you know, disturbing and dystopian time in terms of the global health threat. On the other hand, it's a time of pause and reflection, which is always interesting for design.
Yeah, I agree. And the sustainability question is also finally will probably get the attention that it should have, actually.
Yeah.
And, my last question is, how do you think how the co-creation process and people-centered design will help to create exactly this new model of how people work, and yeah, the new future of work, actually?
So co-design is all about having, as a designer, a participatory mindset as opposed to an expert mindset. So the expert mindset says, I'm the designer, I'm the one with the knowledge and the ability to make decisions about space and materials and layout and so on, and I'll make the decisions. Participatory mindset is I'm going to participate with the key people involved in this project, and I'm going to listen to their views. I'm not going to take my own views off the table, but I'm going to meld their views with my expertise. And so co-design, however you do it, and there are lots of different ways of doing co-design, is a way of making sure that the user voice is upfront and central to the design process. And if you take the coronavirus pandemic, you know, unless you speak to people, unless you get an insight into people's experience, you don't really know people's needs or how they're going to react or how they're going to behave post-pandemic. You don't. You can't know what the future will be, and you can't bring an expert mindset to it. You have to be participatory. So I think that's a big kind of lesson for designers going forward, that they can't just listen to a standard traditional client brief from the business managers. They've got to get a wider range of inputs to design environments that are really helpful to society.
Yeah, and I would say, like, for now, what I see, that it's a higher risk of changing the way how people work at the moment without this co-creation and people-centered approach, and then to have a very bad effect on the productivity, actually, because sometimes companies or architects, they're just thinking they know better, and they just, I don't know, let's send 30% of our staff to the remote work, and that's all, and then like cut the 30% of costs. But in this way, lots of people can damage their own business, and exactly the people-centric design and co-design process and work together with a client can help them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that it's happening in different parts of the world at different speeds, but I think the current crisis will accelerate all of that.
Yeah, and I really, really hope that it will happen. Jeremy, I will just finalize all what we have discussed. maybe you will add something, but yeah, it was very, very insightful. We were speaking about people-centric design, and it's about that it is really important to involve people in the process, because we often facing the design solutions that are not actually for people. They don't help with their needs, and when we go into this process, we really have to be attentive to our clients and their needs, and how they work, observe how they work, and maybe interview them or make some creative sessions with them. And also, we're seeing a big shift in our at this time to the psychological needs of people, and we really need to take it into account if we want to create an environment that helps them to be creative, productive, and also probably in the current time it's also very important, because people are stressed out, and they need to feel support from their organizations as well. And what we see at the moment with pandemic, that it's a new actually opportunities for the workplaces, and they will change definitely. We will see how, but probably first we have to focus on the people's health, and then on the way how they communicate and why they actually need the office. Yeah.
That is a really great summary.
No, actually, thank you, because I don't know, it's just such a beautiful picture, actually. I'm just, guys, if you have any questions, you can try to ask them. I will try to find them. I'm a little bit, like, I'm sorry.
Maybe your cats have got some questions.
Yeah, I have a plenty, you know, like my cats, yeah, they're with me and with my questions, so like yeah, sorry for the cats.
No.
Yeah, I
Big cat person.
I can't.
People want to get more information about how the coronavirus might affect the future of workplace design. Have a look at www.worktechacademy.com, and there's a website with lots of stories and opinion pieces about how the crisis is affecting workplace. Do have a look at our knowledge platform.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really great platform. I'm usually checking it. Jeremy, thank you very much. Because I don't see comments to the video, but yeah, thank you very much one more time for coming.
It's a pleasure. Great to speak to you all, and lovely to see you again. And I hope to be in touch.
Yeah, I hope so too. I will stop now.
Okay.